So anyway, Joseph was dreaming. We skip over then in our storytelling an interesting and very significant but sordid affair, literally, in Genesis 38. And so you can go ahead and read that if you want. We are not covering it with your children, just so you know, since it involves a, borderline incestuous relationship and kids born as a result thereof. The significance, now I'll just bounce quickly through 38. The real significance of Genesis 38 is, aside from the events that happen there, there are, and there's some significance in the stories that we skip along the way. We saw, we did not cover Simeon and Levi as they attacked that village and slaughtered all those people. We didn't cover Reuben sleeping with his stepmom. And huh?
I wonder what did.
Judas
firstborn? It says in 38:7, but Judas' firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him.
Yeah. And so, God terminates a couple people here with extreme prejudice. So you get Judah, though. If you think about Judah's role, Judah is the fourth born. He is the son of Leah, so fourth born of the first wife. First half a dozen children or so came through there. So you have Reuben, kind of disqualifies himself from like the eldest role. Simeon and Levi do likewise. Judah comes right up against that line because he ends up with his daughter-in-law, essentially having children, and so it's a really kind of a sordid affair that you read through there. But you get some of Judah's descendants, and Judah's line gets a little bogged down because he's got his own kids with his wife, his first wife, and then he's got his kids with his second wife, which was actually his son's wife before it was his. So sordid, weird, granted. That's why we're not covering it in the kids' classes. You can well imagine why. 12 tribes, of Israel. Yeah, so when you read through, again, if you were writing a book to detail the founding of your nation, and you were a godly nation who worshiped God and appreciated righteousness and morality, these are the things you wouldn't put in the book, from a human author perspective. Celebrating my nation, we're godly, we're moral, and there is so much heathen baggage in our story you wouldn't believe it. That's just not how we write that particular tale. And so it really lends credence and credibility to the idea that Scripture is divinely inspired, because God can do something incredible with a pretty disastrous backstory. Just look at yourself in the mirror someday. And that's the reality. That's the hope that we see in this. Yes, they're a mess, but most people I know are kind of a mess. And God can still do something pretty impressive through it. And so, again, we wouldn't write this. God did, because it happened. He's truthfully recording the things that happen. But then we get into chapter 39. The story switches to Judah in 38 and then back to Joseph in 39. So, and when we last left Joseph, he had just been sold to Potiphar, and Potiphar was the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And Joseph had been sold as a slave and had been incorporated into Potiphar's house. Nothing has changed there, where we pick it up in chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there.
The Lord was with Joseph. He was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian.
And his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Potiphar was
5.
So it was from that time, that he had made me overseer of the house, and all that he had, and that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was all that he had in the house and in the field.
Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and did not know what he had, except the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance.
All right, so there is, in the matter of moments that we read that, understand that there is a matter of time that has passed, years that has gone by. It wasn't like day one, all of a sudden, Joseph's out working in the field and he plants something and instantly it's corn. And Pharaoh and Potiphar's like, wow, he's good. What you see is Joseph gets into Potiphar's house. Joseph takes the role that he is assigned as a slave and he begins to execute that role. We're not told what it was, but whatever he was doing, it was successful enough, and he did it with enough heart and with enough success that it eventually came to Potiphar's attention. Now, we are not told what it was. You would expect him to be out in the field somewhere or working with the cattle somewhere, something like that, but we're not told. But whatever he was working on, he was working with enough passion and enough heart, despite the fact that he's a slave, and he is attaining success in whatever he's doing, enough that it eventually gets to Potiphar's attention. And so again, this is a period of time. This is not day one you see this. This is something you see over a period of time. And there is likely a series of promotions from within, and probably it didn't start with Potiphar, probably started with some of the other senior servants, kind of moving people around. And everything that Joseph did, he did it with heart, he did it with passion. God blessed Joseph, and everything that he touched turned to gold. I mean, he literally had a Midas touch. And so, things were prospering. We're not told what things, and we're not told how anybody knew this, but it was evident. You can just sometimes see people who just have, everything they touch just works. You ever met somebody like that? Most of us are in the opposite camp. Everything that I touch breaks. And so why don't you fix things? Because then I have to hire somebody to fix the thing I just broke, fixing the thing I was trying to fix, and then they have to fix the thing. You see those contrasting, and we know people like that. And Joseph was just one of those people. Everything he touched just worked. And it got to the place where Potiphar soon realized this guy and his Midas touch would be beneficial if he was running the whole show. Because if he's running the whole show, then the whole show is working really well. And that was Potiphar's mindset. And so he put Joseph in this role as the overseer of his house, the head of his house. So he is now moved into kind of first servant role. We think of Abraham back many chapters ago. He had a servant named Eliezer. You remember Eliezer? And he said, look, Eliezer is born in my house, but he is literally the head of the household. God, can't he be the heir? This is the mindset. This is the weight that Joseph now carries in Potiphar's house. He's a foreigner, but by this time, enough time has passed that probably, Egyptian is fluent and probably appearance is Egyptian. He was about 17 when he got there, so still malleable. Right. Yeah, but you're talking, 19, 20 years old. You can back into a lot of the dates in Joseph's life. You can't get too close to this particular one. When it happened, there's a series of, let's see, 7 and 17 is 24. About 6 years, if memory serves, that he was in Potiphar's house. And that's an if memory serves. We can back into the numbers as we get later on. We can back through because Joseph, when he stands before Pharaoh eventually, we're told that he's 30 years old. So there's a period of 13 years between the time he was sold as a slave and the time that he stands before Pharaoh is only 13 years. So it was time that passed, but we're not told how much time. And we're told, I think we have an approximation or an exact statement of how long he was in prison, and that allows us to figure out how long he was in Potiphar's house. So you kind of back into some of these ages for him. But still not very old, and he's now leading Potiphar's house. And then after a while in this role, Potiphar is so comfortable with Joseph And Joseph is being so successful in the running of Potiphar's house that Potiphar stops thinking about everything. Potiphar goes to work. He's the captain of the guard. He comes home. He eats. He goes back to work. He doesn't worry about anything at home. His whole domestic thing is just not worried about it, because this is happening better with me paying no attention than it was when I was paying attention to it. And so this is the level of capacity that we see in Joseph, the level of trust that we see in Potiphar. Potiphar just, wow, he's out there. And then we get this last blurb right at the end of verse 7 that Joseph is a bit of a looker. He's a hunk. Call him what you will. He's hot. Ladies, I don't know. What do you call it? I don't really think about guys. Yeah. He's Joseph the Beefcake Ben Israel. All right, verse 8. Oh, verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. And that is lie carnally with me.
But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand.
There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me, but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?
Okay, now we need to stop there. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against whom? God. We need to understand that first and foremost, all sin is against God. Regardless of who else our sin may affect, regardless of who else our sin may hurt, our sin is first and foremost against God. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Sometimes like, it's no big deal. It won't hurt anybody. Sin is against God, and we have to, and that's a hard concept to keep, kind of running in the forefront of our mind, and yet it's important. The second thing that is significant about that is who else would have cared if Joseph had done this? Are you sure? Right, Joseph, certainly, here you have some moral integrity raising its head in Joseph's life, going, this would be a compromise of my own character. Would Potiphar have particularly cared? Right. As you read through this, Potiphar would only care if Potiphar knew, if somebody pointed it out to him. The reality of the culture and Mrs. Potiphar's position, and as we read through the story, you kind of get this underlying ho, ho, ho kind of mindset, that she was just the walking jolly green giant, and that this was not like a new thing or an extraordinary thing for her. And indeed, culturally speaking, it would not have been crazy for the lady of the house to find a nice young strapping servant and you're my husband's personal servant, but I'm going to show you what a personal servant really means. That kind of a thing. And so that was not abnormal culturally. What she asked of him was not something that, everybody, it's kind of one of those things, it's done, nobody talks about it, but it's not abnormal either. So Mrs. Potiphar, this is probably not her first rodeo. The other servants of the household are going, dude. But Joseph has got some morality. He understands, you're his wife, and even if you don't think that's significant, I do. I think that's significant. And so Joseph was not willing to cross that line because in his mind, he oversaw all of Potiphar's house. Potiphar had entrusted him with everything, and he had use of everything that was Potiphar's except for one thing. His wife. And he said, I'm just not going to go there. And so, he makes that decision. And there's some reasons we read on. I'll explain why I think that Potiphar probably wouldn't have cared much either. So, verse, wherever we are, 10, sorry. So, she's like, throwing on the full temptress thing here going on.
But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the
All right, so word to the wise. If she is chasing you at this rate, don't go in alone, no matter what. I mean, gentlemen, there are some ways in which we can be prudent. Not being alone with another woman it's one of the easiest things to be prudent about. Occasionally it will complicate life, but it is such a good rule to live by. Joseph doesn't do it, and all of a sudden he's got a problem. She comes up and, forget this subtlety. We're going with a full frontal attack. And if you've ever seen pictures of Egyptian women and what they wear or wore or didn't wear, as the case may be, since their clothing was kind of gauze at best, full frontal attack has a whole different connotation. Yeah, exactly. And so she grabs his coat, his clothes, and he's like, I am so out of here, and he like leaves it behind. So now he's running around less than fully clothed. We won't know that he's necessarily completely unclothed, but servants don't typically wear much. You get that Egyptian thing is just kind of like the full cover loincloth idea, and it may have been all he was wearing. That and a necklace, and that doesn't cover much. So verse 13. Oh, that's me. Thank you. And so it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside,
that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, See, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice.
And it came to pass, when he had heard that lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled, and I got him out.
All right, so I think it was Shakespeare. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Ta-da. Exhibit number 1. And so this is, and it's interesting. She calls out to the men of the house. Now the underhand part of this, the undercurrent of this is which men of the house? Her men of the house. And you can get this, and you say, Pastor, your mind's in the gutter. Probably, but this story accommodates that. These are, in all probability, the men who were already loyal to her for the same reasons that she was trying to make Joseph loyal to her. These were her guys that were coming to her aid. Anyway. 16. Is that me again? Already? Okay. Oh, where are you? 16. No, that's okay.
And then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came into me to mock me.
So it happened, and then the husband left his garment and went outside.
All right, so problem. This just became a problem for Potiphar. In all likelihood, he'd married pretty well. You can't just take this kind of an accusation and do nothing. So it was, verse 19, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Now, gentlemen, we get this, right? I'm mad. He is not mad for the reasons you'd be mad. Keep reading.
Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison.
Okay, now Potiphar is the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Prison is one of those things that are under his purview. He is, under his authority. Now, this is home life, and now this is work life. As a slave, what rights did Joseph have to his own life? What rights did Potiphar have to his life? All. Who would have batted an eyelash if Potiphar had beheaded Joseph like that? Or run him through with one of those cool C-shaped swords that they carried? Nobody. Was Potiphar angry? Yes. Did Potiphar blame Joseph for what was going on? This is not a moral anger. This is an economic anger. He has to deal with Joseph. Joseph has to be removed from the head of his household, which is a bummer because Joseph is really good at what he does. But Joseph is too valuable to kill, and my wife is a bit of a tramp. And so I'm going to imprison him, not kill him. Normal male passions. This is dead. I mean, these are dying words. You know, you came in after my wife. These are dying words. Potiphar was angry, not at what Joseph was accused of, but at the situation that he now had to deal with. Understand that. And so Joseph winds up in prison. Now he's moved from Potiphar's home life and he's moved into Potiphar's work life. He's removed. His wife is satisfied. You know, he's gone. You know, last thing she saw was his, Jewish butt being dragged out by guards. What he does, she doesn't know. He's gone. Her honor is satisfied. What of it she has. His honor is satisfied. He had to do something. He did something. But Joseph is still alive. And that is going to come in handy as we keep going.
The Lord was with Joseph, and he showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison.
He put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and made him responsible for everything that was done in the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hands all the prisoners who were
That's okay. The words are a lot different.
The
3.
keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it possible.
Okay, and so now Joseph, Potiphar's loss was the prison keeper's gain, because now all of a sudden whatever Joseph did in prison worked, and all of a sudden and probably had a reputation. This was probably a faster transition. Potiphar had probably bragged on Joseph before, and so the prison keeper's like, look, it really is true, dude. You run the place. I'm going to go take a nap, and so this is what happens now. The guy who's in charge of Pharaoh's prison is just off playing solitaire on his abacus, and Joseph's running the prison. And how do you prosper in a prison? I don't know. Maybe work camps, maybe we're not really told, but everything that Joseph touched turned to gold, and everybody knew it. And so the prison keeper's like, dude, my life just got great. And he's off on vacation somewhere for the first time this century, and Joseph's running and it's fine. And what's interesting, every time, and it's kind of an interesting thing as you look through this, every time Joseph's life gets worse, you've got this statement in there, and the Lord was with him. The Lord was with him. And his life is getting worse. But the Lord is with him. So on the one hand, there's some encouragement in that. On the other hand, Joseph's going, hey, God, could you step back just a little bit? Because every time you get closer, my life gets worse. That's humor. I don't think he's really did that. But you see that in there. It would, from a human perspective, it would be easy to say Joseph's life is getting worse and worse and worse, and indeed it does appear to be. And yet God keeps reminding us, yeah, things don't seem to be going well for Joseph, but I'm still part of the equation.
Even though he's in prison, he's still doing the best he possibly can with what he's given.
Right.
You look at it from, seems to be the mantra, the positive end of it is, okay, I'm in prison, but I'm going to do the best I possibly can
Right.
in prison, no matter what, because God is with me. And so whatever you deal me, I'm going to do the best I can.
Right, and his cell probably had satellite TV and carrying machine and all the amenities that one could have in prison. Joseph probably had.
Yeah, exactly. Because even though his life got worse, it's still not bad because now everybody knows
Right.
do this, and so I still prosper.
Right, and he still has a pulse, which is beneficial. After the whole thing, yeah, could he? Right. Let's see, chapter 40. So we need to hasten through here. So let me. It's like you remember. Let me explain. No time. Let me sum up. Princess Bride. I love that movie. So in chapter 40, then you have this story where Pharaoh, as any king who is despotic in nature, and most of them are, has a couple servants that displease him, and so he throws them in prison. And one of them is his cupbearer, and the other one is his baker. Understanding a cupbearer in most families where you have a monarchy, the cupbearer isn't just the guy who hands the king his cup. He's the guy who drinks the cup before he hands it to the king. If he dies, the king doesn't drink it, and he gets a new cupbearer. There's almost intimacy in this relationship because you don't eat anything that your cupbearer didn't already eat. You don't drink anything that he didn't already drink. I mean, you're eating and drinking off the same flatware if you had them, because if anything's got poison, you want him to die, not you. So this is a pretty prominent guy. And then the baker, he who doesn't like, I don't know what kind of baked goods do Egyptians eat. Somebody needs to find this out, actually. So we have this going on. So these two guys are committed to prison. They have a dream. Both of them have a dream the same night. The cupbearer has a dream where he squeezes cups into the juice and hands it back to Pharaoh, and the baker has a dream where he's carrying bread on his head, and the birds come in and they take all the bread away, and so they're bummed out, and Joseph recognizes that they're bummed out, and he says, "Hey, what's going on? We had a dream, but there's nobody here to interpret it." And Joseph said, "Well, who interprets dreams but God? God's the one who gives dreams. God's the one who interprets dreams. Hit me with them. Let's see what happens." And so they tell Joseph what their dreams were, and Joseph says to the cupbearer, in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to restore you to your post. And so the baker's all excited, and he tells Joseph his dream. He goes, "In 3 days, you're dead." And so 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. He throws a party. Sure enough, he restores the cupbearer to his position, and he kills the baker. And so it came to pass. And Joseph's his request of the cupbearer is, when you get back to Pharaoh's house, could you just put in a good word for me? I didn't do anything to be here. I'm innocent. And he really was. But he figured if I can get out, that'd be great. And so the cupbearer is so excited that he promptly forgets Joseph. But that sets us up for what's actually going to happen next. So I would encourage you, read chapter 40. I kind of summed it up, but I'm sure I left something out. So let me pray, because we're going to be invaded. We need to go. Father, we love you. We thank you for the day. We thank you for Jesus. We thank you for this story. Lord, as we see Joseph and we see the moral character that he demonstrated, Father, and we see that you were with him, even though things seem to be getting worse and worse and worse, being sold, being enslaved, being imprisoned, still you were with him. You made him prosperous in each of those bad situations, and we know ultimately you elevated him. Father, help us to trust you just as Joseph did, to see that you were with us in all of the situations in our life that look bad. Father, help us as Joseph did to just attack those situations with passion and purpose, and to make the best of them that we can. Father, that's our prayer, that we would be more like Joseph, who was more like Jesus. We pray in Jesus' good name.